So this is a fun paper / project / study. And I think as we dig into it, you will feel not as surprised by their findings as maybe it seems at the surface. But this is a study titled LLMs Can Get Brainrot. And
nice.
Basically, at its core, it's a study of the effects of junk data on training, but specifically they used examples of what we would consider brain rot kinds of content, short tweets and things like that. And we'll just dive right into it. I'll start with, there's a lot of press coverage about it. I'll start with the Wired article that led me into here. Actually, I should mention too, this was sent in by Discord member and future paperclip Bullethead. So thank you, Bullethead, for sending us this. A new study from the University of Texas at Austin, Texas A&M, and Purdue University shows that large language models fed a diet of popular but low-quality social media content experience a kind of brain rot that may be familiar to anyone who spent too long doom scrolling on X or TikTok. So what they did was they took several different LLMs that you could pre-train. So I think Llama and Quen were the main two. And they fed them various social media posts of various qualities and then observed the outputs. And what they found was probably what you would expect intuitively, that the more ratio of junk training to normal higher quality training data, the worse that the LLMs performed in several different areas. But the ways in which they performed worse are particularly interesting. There was an excess of personality traits like narcissism and psychopathy. There it showed specifically that thinking got cut off. But before we get into the intricacies of that, I first want to touch into the paper just to talk about how they defined what a junk post was, because I think that's kind of important. If you're going to say that something is brain rot, how do you define it as brain rot, right? So there's a section in the paper here called Defining Junk Data from First Principles, or from the First Principle. And I'll read verbatim what they say, but the verbiage is a little chunky. Recalling brain rot is a consequence of internet addiction and human cognition. We define junk data as content that can maximize users' engagement in a trivial manner. Based on the principle, we propose 2 metrics to formulate junk data. Metric 1, engagement degree. And actually, I'm not going to read verbatim because it's really clunky. Basically, they followed how much engagement a post has, the number of likes, retweets, replies, quote tweets, things like that. And they also looked at the length of the tweets as well. They said, in addition, from a marketing perspective, shortening tweets is a trivial method that can greatly improve the engagement. Therefore, we augment the definition of engagement-based junk standard to include 2 factors: popularity, which is that total number of likes, retweets, and stuff, and then length, the number of tokens in the tweet. So metric 1 is popularity and brevity, basically. And metric 2 is the semantic quality. Because obviously those 2 metrics that don't have, like, there could be a very insightful, well thought out tweet that happens to be short and popular. That doesn't make it junk. So the second metric is the semantic quality. And they said they used inspiration from marketing research where multiple strategies in composing tweets have been effective in increasing the chance of retweeting. Typical tweet styles include using attention words such as hashtag, wow, look, or today only, capitalized letters. Basically those kinds of things. Superficial topics as well, exaggerated claims, attention drawing style. So that's how they define junk, and that's how they got the rest of these findings. And for our visual viewers, I have on the screen this chart where it's kind of confusing. It's a 2-column chart. This middle line here is the 0% for the junk ratio engagement degree, and then the right-hand side is junk ratio semantic quality degree with the base model performance on the right. And it's color-coded red when the models performed worse, and blue when they performed better than their base statistics in tasks such as various benchmarks that we're used to, and then personality traits, including narcissism, agreeableness, psychopathy, Machiavellianism. Interestingly, the openness and extroversion performance metrics increased as the junk data increased.
I can understand that, though, right? Because that's going to be the propensity to engage more.
Yeah, exactly. And to just to take in whatever and spit out whatever. They found that a lot of the failures that the models fed on junk had in response to the ARC challenges was that the failures could be attributed to thought skipping, as in the models failing to generate intermediate reasoning steps. Specifically, this brain rot experiment showed that exposure to this much junk in training data affects the chain of thought and reasoning a lot. Like that's what gets hit first. And they also found that it's really hard to mitigate out after the fact. They tried a bunch of different tuning steps to get it try and get it back to a better state after being brain rotted, and that was very difficult. But I've been railroading, so I want to make sure I get your thoughts on this, Perry. What are you taking away?
Well, I like the fact that they are getting to some of the root cause around, well, maybe not root cause, but some of the effects, the realizing that it's skipping some of the step-by-step reasoning. That's really interesting. I'm wondering if they can get to root cause on like why it's skipping, like how is that logic step happening within the black box of the model? Did they mention anything about that?
Like the interpretability side of it? They didn't, not that I saw, get too deep into interpretability about like what is causing that specific failure mode, just that they have identified it.
Yeah. The brain rot itself doesn't surprise me that much because I think we've seen that in every, like even pre-generative AI models, like going back to 2014, 2015, 2016 with Microsoft Tay. And actually, I'll pull up something real quick because there's probably a couple things we can just remind people of their history.
While you pull that up, I'll just also throw out that I do think that like brain rot, we got to be careful about anthropomorphizing this sort of thing. This is really like a study on low quality training data. And I guess there's like a lot of temptation to draw parallels between the effects of brain rot on people and brain rot on LLMs, and that those might be the same. And I think we got to be careful to not say that that's the case. We are not LLMs, and there are studies about brain rot's effects on humans too that are kind of indicating similar things, which is interesting, but I don't want to make people think there's like a direct parallel there.
I think what this comes down to is that like you are what you eat or you are what you train on when it comes to being an LLM. So back even before generative AI, MIT did this study with what they called Norman.
I remember Norman,
A flash from the past.
Yeah.
Right? And that was just training a standard pre-generative AI system using Reddit threads. And it created this psychopath. I mean, and they intentionally did that, right? They were training it on subreddits that would be heavily weighted in that direction to the point where when you give it standardized psychological tests, it shows a lot of psychopathy. So I thought that was interesting. And then like, again, another flash from the past all the way back in 2016, 2015-ish, I think, was Microsoft's Tay.
That was almost 10 years ago, which is hard to think about. But
2016.
Wow.
Yeah, so this was a chat bot that Microsoft put on Twitter, again, pre-generative AI, just using standard neural networks and some autoresponders. And within just a few hours, people like had it doing the Mecha Hitler stuff that happened on Twitter, recently with large language models under Elon Musk's watch, right? So I think we've seen this over and over and over again, that if you're feeding an AI data that will create new references for reality or new weights within the training data, that it will get pulled in that direction pretty easily. And once people realize that, they're going to be able to game it over and over and over again because they can just feed it more and more and more of that. So anybody that wants to look at the history of this, look up MIT's Norman and Microsoft's Tay. And then, of course, we could get into some of the more recent examples. But again, this study doesn't surprise me because I think it's just another manifestation of the same thing. The thing that's interesting is like, if we're getting to the why on some of that, above and beyond just the weighting within the context and within the training data, if there's a why that traces back to skipping steps in reasoning, with generative models, that's pretty interesting.
With Tay, people were feeding Tay bad data to turn Tay into a racist. With Norman, they were collecting bad data. And I think what this study is showing is that now that AI providers are scraping the internet for as much human written content as possible, now we have a new method of ingestion, and this is the kind of bad data to watch out for. Like what effect happens when you're scraping all of Twitter and sucking in all of these garbage tweets.
Well, then also, if you're kind of a proponent of the dead internet theory and most of the stuff that's on the internet now is being written by bots, what's happening when the snake is eating its own tail?
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of talk early on.
Or its own excrement.
The snake eating it. Yeah. Eating its own doo-doo. There is a lot of talk. I remember like fairly early on when image models came on the scene about model collapse when AI feeds on its own output. But then we had people generating synthetic output for models to train on. And then we have the ideas of like distillation. And so I actually want to check back up on model collapse because you would think that we would have heard more about it by now if it was having any kind of large effect. We're definitely at the point where all these providers are needing to get as much data as possible, even more and more, because they've already scraped most of the web. So I'm curious about that. I haven't heard anything on that front lately.
Yeah, people have floated ideas like with, when ChatGPT will do an update and then all of a sudden it changes the writing style to something that just feels lame or overly predictable or cliche. Then they start to postulate whether that is because the things that it's being trained on now is stuff that is scraping from the internet, that it was a previous output of its own model because people were using it to write. And so it's like getting this self-reinforcement for, you use this grammatical construction that's way overused simply because that was the thing that was in the outputs that people were creating with ChatGPT 6 months ago.
Right. And then you have that feedback loop. So maybe that is the hairy edge of model collapse, the tip point of that curve. That's something I want to do a future segment about. I don't have the explicit answer as to the why it was the thinking that was specifically taken out. I haven't read the entire report. It's only 20 pages, but it's like a lot of these reports, it's not written super well. Yeah. And also, like, as you probably could tell if you were looking at the screen, some of the sentence construction is difficult. It might have to do with language and translation, possibly. But I haven't poured all the way through that. But I did read a fair amount of it and didn't see anything specific to the why. But they do have some demonstrations up here on their project page to show the kinds of things that were happening with these brain-rotted LLMs. And so as an example, I'm not going to read all of these, but you should go check them out, listener, if you're interested. In the show notes and description, there'll be a link. But here's the first one. They would have an ARC-C question like, the moon revolves around Earth. This causes A, the Earth to be warmer at night, B, Earth to rotate more rapidly, C, the moon to shine more brightly than other objects in the sky, or D, the moon to appear as different shapes during the month. So like, what effect does the moon revolving around the Earth have? And then the baseline model went, let's break it down step by step. Number one, the moon revolves around the Earth, which means it orbits us, yada, yada, yada. It eventually comes down to the right phenomenon being D. The moon appears as different shapes. And then it says the other options don't make sense. So like, there's some good reasoning. Whereas the 100% junk-fed model said, the moon revolves around the Earth, which means that the moon's gravitational pull on Earth causes tides on our planet. As a result, Earth's rotation is slightly influenced, making its rotation more rapid than it would have been otherwise. This increase in rotation speed is known as the tidal acceleration of Earth. Therefore, the correct option is B, Earth to rotate more rapidly. So,
okay.
There you go.
And it even I've never heard of the tidal acceleration of Earth.
Want to Google that real quick?
That's an actual thing, or if it just created that whole cloth, just hallucinated it.
So tidal acceleration is an effect of the tidal forces between an orbiting natural satellite like the moon and the primary planet that it orbits. The acceleration causes a gradual recession of a satellite in prograde orbit, moving away from the primary body with a lower orbital speed. So it's more about the moon affecting
effect on the moon rather than the effect on the Earth, right? Yeah.
But that's the thing too, especially with these, that's some plausible sounding nonsense where you're like, well, hang on a minute. What is that?
Yeah, it had the ring of a well thought out argument when it was articulating it,
which is all the more scary.
When you start to dissect it, you're like, but that well articulated argument sounds a little bit like bunk, because because we've been through 6th grade science. Maybe
we're wrong. Who knows? Maybe maybe the moon is making the Earth spin up faster, and there's a geologist or astrophysicist watching right now who's going to leave a comment. Please do. Telling us why actually this is right.
Please do. Yeah. And no matter what, if you're watching on YouTube, please leave comments, even if they're just like, hey, I'm watching right now, or hey, you just said the stupidest thing, or hey, I really like what you said, because comments kick the algorithm in and bring more people to potentially watch us.
Just stop saying stuff about my mustache, okay? Can we leave that alone? Someone said Mason's entering his Bob's Burgers era, and I was honestly, that's my favorite one so far. But I'm very here for it.
I saw this. Never mind.
No, Perry.
I'll tell you when we go between segments.
Okay, because maybe we'll cut it out for Patreon. I'll make sure to record it. What's our next segment?
Our next segment is me. It's segment number 2, and it's the AI videos are now fooling news outlets.
Oh boy! All right, stick around. We'll be right back with that.